Welcome to Speak Easy English. Today's story is about hunger, kindness, joy, and the power of charity. In a small town surrounded by golden wheat fields, there was a little bakery on the corner of the market square. It belonged to a kind man named Anwar, who was known by everyone simply as the baker. Every morning, long before the sun came up, Anwar lit his great oven and began to bake. And every morning, the most wonderful smell of fresh, warm bread drifted out across the whole town, waking the people gently and making them smile. Anwar loved his work and he loved his town. His bread was the best for many miles, soft and golden and full of warmth. People came from far and wide to buy it. Anwar was not a rich man, but he earned enough to live comfortably, and his heart was always full, because he believed that making bread to feed people was the finest work a man could do. Bread is life, he often said. And to make bread for others is to share life with them. For many years, the town was happy and the harvests were good. But then came a terrible time. The rains failed, year after year. The golden wheat fields turned brown and bare. A great hunger fell upon the whole region. The price of flour rose higher and higher, until the poor families of the town could no longer afford to buy bread at all. Mothers grew thin so that their children could eat. Old people went to bed with empty stomachs. The hunger spread through the town like a cold and creeping shadow. Anwar watched his beloved town suffer, and his kind heart could not bear it. Every day, hungry people walked past his bakery, looking at the warm bread in his window with sad and longing eyes, knowing they had no money to buy it. Among them were little children, their faces pale and thin. Anwar could not stand to see it. So the baker made a quiet decision. One cold morning, he opened his door and called out to the hungry people in the square. "Friends," he said, "in these hard times, no one in this town will go hungry while my oven still burns. If you have money, pay me what you can. And if you have no money, then come anyway, and take bread, and may it give you strength. No child will cry from hunger as long as I am the baker of this town." The people could hardly believe their ears. They came forward, slowly at first, and Anwar gave them bread, warm and fresh from the oven, asking for nothing in return. The relief and gratitude on their faces filled Anwar's heart with a joy greater than any money could give. From that day on, the bakery became a place of hope. Every morning, Anwar baked far more bread than he could sell, and he gave the extra away freely to anyone who was hungry. But feeding a whole town was not easy, and it came at a great cost to Anwar. Flour was terribly expensive in those hard times. To buy enough to feed everyone, Anwar spent all the money he had saved over many years. He worked longer and harder than ever before, rising even earlier and sleeping even less, so that he could bake enough for all. He gave away so much that he had little left for himself. He ate simply, wore his old clothes, and went without comforts. Some nights, Anwar himself went to bed tired and with very little in his own stomach. But every time he saw a hungry child eat his bread and smile, he felt that it was all worthwhile. There was one family in particular that Anwar would always remember. A young mother named Sita came to his bakery one freezing morning, carrying a thin baby and holding the hand of a small, shivering boy. She had no money at all, and her children had not eaten in 2 days. She was too proud to beg, but her hunger and her love for her children had finally driven her to Anwar's door. With tears in her eyes, she whispered, "Please, sir, just a little bread for my children. I will repay you somehow, I promise." Anwar's heart broke at the sight. He gave her not a little, but a whole basket of bread, along with some milk for the baby. "Pay me nothing," he said warmly. "And come back every morning, for as long as these hard times last." Sita wept with gratitude, and from that day she and her children came each morning, and Anwar's bread kept them alive through the long famine. But not everyone admired what Anwar did. There was another merchant in the town, a greedy grain seller named Thermopylae, who had grown rich during the famine by selling his grain at terribly high prices to the desperate. He grew angry at the kind baker, for Anwar's free bread meant that fewer people were forced to buy his costly grain. "You are a fool, Anwar," Thermopylae sneered one day. "These are hard times. This is when a clever man makes his fortune. The hungry will pay anything for food, but you give it away for free. You will end your days as poor as the beggars you feed." Anwar looked at the greedy merchant calmly and replied, "You see the hunger of these people as a chance to grow rich. I see it as a chance to help. You may end these times with a fuller purse than mine, Thermopylae. But I will end them with a fuller heart and with the love of every family in this town." Thermopylae only laughed and walked away, certain that the foolish baker would ruin himself. But as the months passed, the whole town came to love and bless Anwar, while they grew to despise the greedy Thermopylae, who had grown fat on their suffering. They remembered who had helped them in their darkest hour and who had robbed them. And so kindness and greed each began, slowly, to earn their true rewards. Some people warned him to stop. "Anwar, you are ruining yourself," they said. "You are spending all your savings. You are working yourself sick. You cannot feed the whole town forever. Think of yourself. Save your money before it is too late." But Anwar only shook his head and smiled. "What good is money in my box," he asked, "when there are hungry children outside my door? I would rather have an empty box and a full town than a full box and an empty heart. Bread is meant to be shared. That is the whole purpose of bread." And so, through all the long, hard months of the hunger, Anwar kept his oven burning and his door open. His bread kept the poor families of the town alive. Mothers blessed his name. Children who would have gone hungry grew strong on his bread. The whole town leaned on the kindness of one humble baker, and he never let them fall. Now, the people of the town were poor, but they were not blind. They saw the great sacrifice that Anwar was making for them. They saw how he gave everything he had, asking for nothing in return. They saw him grow thin and tired in order to feed them. And in the hearts of the townspeople, a deep love and gratitude for the baker began to grow. One day, the people of the town decided that they could not simply take Anwar's kindness forever without giving something back. So they came together, all of them, the poor and the slightly less poor, and they began to help him in return. A farmer who had a little grain left brought a sack of it to the bakery. "Take this, Anwar," he said. "It is not much, but it will help you keep baking." A young man with strong arms came each morning to help carry the heavy sacks and tend the great oven, so that Anwar could rest a little. The women of the town took turns helping to shape the loaves and serve the people. The children gathered firewood for the oven. What had begun as one man's kindness slowly became the whole town's kindness. Everyone gave what little they could, and together they kept the great oven burning. The bakery on the corner became the beating heart of the town, a place where the strong helped the weak and where no one was ever turned away hungry. The hunger that had threatened to break the town apart had, through Anwar's example, brought the people closer together than they had ever been before. At last, after many long and difficult months, the rains returned. The fields turned green again and then golden. The harvest came in, rich and plentiful, and the great hunger finally ended. The town began to recover, and slowly, the people grew prosperous once more. And the people did not forget what Anwar had done. When the first good harvest came in, every farmer in the town brought a portion of his wheat to the baker's door, far more than Anwar had ever given away. "This is the smallest way we can thank you," they said. "You fed us when we could not feed ourselves. You gave everything you had to keep our children alive. Now let us fill your storehouse. Dear friend, for you will never want for anything again as long as this town stands. Anwar's bakery overflowed with gifts, and he became, in the end, far richer than he had ever been before, not only in grain, but in the love of an entire town. And what do you think Anwar did with his overflowing storehouse? He did exactly what he had always done. The very next morning, he rose before the sun, lit his great oven, and began to bake, not only to sell, but to give. For the lesson of the great hunger had sunk deep into his heart, and he never again forgot how many people in the world go to sleep with empty stomachs. He set aside a portion of every single day's baking for anyone in need. And he made the young man who had helped him through the famine his partner, so that the bakery's kindness would continue long after Anwar himself was gone. Travelers passing through the town would hear the story of the baker who had fed everyone through the famine, and they would carry it to distant places, until the tale of Anwar's kindness was told around fires in towns he had never even seen. But the greatest reward for Anwar was not the grain that filled his storehouse. It was something far deeper. It was the knowledge that, in the darkest time his town had ever known, he had not turned away. He had shared what he had. He had kept his neighbors alive. He had become the very heart of his community. And he had learned that kindness, once given, has a way of spreading from person to person until it returns to the giver many times over. In the years that followed, Anwar continued to bake his wonderful bread, and he always kept a portion aside each day to give freely to anyone in need. And whenever a young person asked him why he gave so much away, the old baker would smile, pull a warm loaf from his oven, and say, "When I was young, I thought that to keep something was to have it, and to give something away was to lose it. But the great hunger taught me the truth. The bread I kept for myself fed me for a day and was gone. But the bread I gave away fed my whole town, and it fed my own soul, and it came back to me 100-fold in love." We do not truly own what we keep. We only truly own what we give. So bake your bread, my child, and share it freely. A loaf shared is never lost. It only grows. And that is the story of the baker who fed the town. A story that reminds us that true charity is giving even when it costs us dearly. That one person's kindness can hold a whole community together. And that the bread we share with others nourishes our own hearts most of all.